Hey everybody, it is Trags Mike Petralia back with the first playoff episode, 2022 style or 2023 style of the JungleRoar podcast. I welcome in old friend, new friend. I don't know how you want to categorize yourself, Mike Niziolek of Cleveland.com, covering the Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL. Doing a great job doing so, along with Andrew Gillis and Mohammed Ahmed for Cleveland.com. Michael, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm glad I got the return invite. I'm excited.
Your last performance was outstanding, so I had you booked down and marked down right away to return. Returning to the playoffs, those Cincinnati Bengals, for the first time ever, they are returning to the playoffs as repeat divisional champions. AFC North divisional champions. First time in their 55-year history they have accomplished that. Hard to believe, actually. As a Cincinnati native, I grew up watching a lot of those teams in the 70s and the 80s, and a lot of great teams in those era. They never repeated. This team has repeated, but as we heard Monday down at Paycor Stadium, Mike, this team has much bigger goals ahead of them, don't they?
Yeah, it's just sort of like and next, that they want they want to keep going. They want to win the AFC, they want to get to the Super Bowl, and they want to win it. So this felt like a very subdued celebration. I felt like in the locker room. They busted out the shirts, the hats, and the cigars, but that was it. Really it was just sort of, I think, 24 hours and they were ready to move on. And I think it would probably be even less if it hadn't been just an email that got it to them in the first place. They felt like they had to do a little more, I think, to stick it to the NFL. I think they felt like, this was theirs and they should have been here, and they have bigger goals in mind, like you said.
Sticking it to the NFL, you had a nice piece on Cleveland.com breaking down the Joe Mixon coin flip celebration. You termed it, and I don't think it's hyperbole, one of the grandest celebrations in Bengals history. I think one of the more poignant celebrations in Bengal history, because there were a lot of people inside that organization not pleased with how the NFL handled the tie-breaking procedure. It could still impact it won't impact the Bengals now, because if they get to the AFC Championship, it won't be a neutral site in terms of Kansas City. It would be at Kansas City. We know that. Right. But still, the way the whole deal was handled and keeping, I think, the team in limbo and then coming out at the end with the coin flip, they wanted to make sure that they took care of that on their own. Give us a little insight into what you learned about that Joe Mixon celebration.
Well, yeah, Mixon, kind of decided on Saturday night, and then found a shiny quarter he had left over from McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. He wasn't sure which fast food restaurant he had it. But the biggest obstacle was figuring out where to hide it, because he thought if he put it in his shoe, it might go under and then he would step on it, at some point, because you're not sure when you're going to score. So he put tape inside of his glove and had it in there, and it worked out perfect. I mean, he was the one to get it. Tyler Boyd got tackled on the one, he punches it in, and he was really proud of the arc that he got on the flip. And so that was kind of like the proud moment he had, and he didn't know if it was heads or tails. He just kicked the coin, so that was the only disappointing. I was like, was it heads or tails? Did you call it? He's like, no. But it was good. It was a fun moment for them. I think the fans certainly enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of frustration. I think it went even beyond that, just that they went outside the rule book. And you were on the conference call with the NFL with when they sort of detailed why they did it, what the downside would have been to just sticking to win percentage. I know they said, well, it's an extraordinary situation.
271 versus 272 is what Rich McKay kept repeating to me, because I did ask McKay exactly that question. Let me get it straight, Rich. The win percentage was not good enough for you and the league. By you, I mean, the NFL was not good enough for the NFL at the championship level. Why, again, reiterate why that was. And he went into this explanation that it was never seen before that two teams played 270, or two teams played 16 games, or one fewer game than the standard, that the rest of the league would play. And in this particular case, 271 games were played, not 272. There was no rule book guideline precedent for that. So they decided, well, let's just make it up on the fly and try to come up with the most equitable solution.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, Michael, it usually winds up backfiring badly. You already have the rule in place. That was Mixon's whole beef with his tweet. I believe it was on Thursday night.
Yeah, he just essentially took a picture of the rule book that says we'll
Correct.
go decide by win percentage. And yeah, because the answer is okay, we get that. We get it extraordinary circumstances. We get there's one less game, but what is the down what who would have been negatively impacted by the win percentage? I mean, it would have basically been the same thing that they did, except for the neutral site. I understand they were trying to do that, but I don't know. It just felt like going beyond, because like now what's the precedent? So if there's another canceled game, they have to have convene another special league meeting. It's like, how does this go forward? Because that's how I viewed it. Heaven forbid something like this happens, or it's weather or whatever it is.
Sure.
How is this a precedent? So you went outside and created these new rules. And the timing of it, I think the Bengals were kind of irked. 2 days before a game, you're doing this, and it sounded like Katie Blackburn, who's on the competition committee, made her case known. It almost, from Pro Football Talk Report, it was only passed by one vote. They almost got it blocked and a different method. But yeah, I think the Bengals were frustrated, and it's sort of built into that us versus everybody sort of motto that they've had all season, and so they're using it, I think. But yeah, certainly, they were not happy.
There was a banner, and I'm sure you took note of this, at Paycor Stadium on Sunday during the Ravens game, in the middle of the upper deck, where there usually are.
Yeah, he has a weekly banner. Yes,
yeah, he has a weekly banner up, and that every Bengal fan that's been in Paycor / Paul Brown Stadium knows exactly where I'm talking about. And it's on the east side, middle of the upper deck. And this time the banner read, "Please disrespect us." And I think that did a brilliant job of summing up what a lot of the fans and a lot of the people in the organization were feeling. I want to wrap up, that whole thing with just this point. There was a report out from ESPN regarding the situation regarding Damar Hamlin, and that the Bengals and Bills did not want to resume that game. And I think Zach Taylor made that very clear last week when he first talked about it on Wednesday, that the Bengals and Bills were in no way, shape, or form in a mindset to resume that game. And the NFL, and I was on that midnight call on Monday night, the night the game was canceled, and Troy Vincent seemed adamant, like almost too much so.
Doth protest too much.
He who doth protest too much, exactly. Yeah. Like, and now comes out the report that the NFL actually kind of wanted the two teams to resume, and the two teams told the NFL, no way, we're not resuming. I had that sense Monday night when Troy was making that case that to do this, I forget the verbiage he used, but it would be disrespectful. We should never be.
Well, he said that the suggestion made, the reports, which are ESPN saying on the broadcast, not reports from media, were disrespectful and sort of like, beyond the pale, essentially.
Right. And I just think that as we put this whole thing to rest, and now Damar Hamlin's back in Buffalo, and Zach Taylor was right on Monday, a miraculous turn of events, and everybody is very relieved for Damar Hamlin, his family, and the Buffalo Bills. No question about that. But I just found it interesting here on Monday, as we put a bow on it, that the NFL is in, again, another kind of PR sauce that they cooked up themselves.
Well, I thought Joe Buck said in that story, nobody ever asked me to retract it in that 40 minutes. From the end, if it was not true, wouldn't they have said, like, you're reporting? Sure. They have an open line to the league during the game, and he's like, nobody said you're wrong. He said, I would have immediately gone on air and said I had it wrong. He's a professional.
Oh, no, there's no question he would.
And so, that was sort of how that piece ended, and it sort of like hung, heavy, that if the NFL had said, like,
look,
it's obvious. Yeah,
Mike, you and I both know we've been around football long enough to know, and I was around Deflategate, obviously, and I thought that was a ridiculous story. The PR optics of the National Football League are not always the best. They don't always handle situations like this in terms of their messaging. I'm not saying there's anything they could have done any better to support the family of Damar Hamlin and Damar
right,
himself. I'm not
right.
saying that whatsoever. This is about how the story gets presented to the public and what really happened.
Well, they're
Okay,
just
let's
scared to
go ahead.
say it was a mess, right? Like nobody knew what was going on because it was an
And
unprecedented situation, and they want to act like it was like, well, we stepped in and everything was under control. No, nobody knew what was happening. Sean McDermott was out, like thinking about so much other stuff, and it was a little messy, and they just don't want to say like it took us a minute to figure out what we were doing.
the
That's,
most straightforward thing that Troy Vincent said in that conference call, Mike, was it was very fluid. It was
yeah,
chaotic.
yeah.
Nobody holds that against the National Football League simply because of what everybody could see in the stadium and on television, the national television audience. Everybody knew it was chaotic and just holding their breath. Okay. Sunday, Bengals win 27-16. They finished 12-4 for the fourth time in franchise history. There is concern going into the playoffs about the Bengals offense. I take the tack that, and I think we got this from Brian Callahan, Bengals offensive coordinator, on Monday. I don't think they were showing a lot of what their offense is going to be in the playoff game. I think it's going to be vastly different. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a different quarterback. He looked almost tentative. His throws, he wasn't finishing his throws on Sunday in that win. It just looked like a different Joe Burrow, almost as if, Mike, and I don't know if you agree with this, almost as if Burrow knew going into that game, we're not going to show everything. I am not going to have the same options available to me that I will in a playoff game. So I'm going to kind of hold back. And it just kind of had that sense all afternoon long.
Yes, but I wonder if they regret that a little bit because like I feel like if they had spent like 5 more minutes, like in one more touchdown, they could have
Putting
been
away the
done.
Ravens. Right.
And I think it really ended up being costly that the starting offensive line was on the field in that final minutes. Like Alex Kappa getting injured midway through because they needed to kind of finish it because as strange as Baltimore's strategy was, they were still close. I mean, it was still, like it wasn't a blowout. And so the Bengals sort of, Callahan mentioned, like by the second half, they just wanted the game over essentially, but they still had to kind of keep their guys in there. I think at halftime it became clear because they were watching the scoreboard too, that Buffalo, pulled away. And so they were just locked into that seating and really they were going to host Baltimore again. But I do wonder if they regretted a little bit that, because I think that's going to loom large. I think that injury, they're going to have their full playbook, and Burrow I think will be a little more sharp. But man, that right side of the line could be in rough shape come Sunday.
All right. Hakeem Adeniji has already filled in for Lael Collins, who tore his left ACL. He's obviously done for the year on IR. Max Sharping has 30 NFL starts. He will be your almost certainly, barring a miraculous recovery by Alex Kappa in his left ankle, he will be your starting right guard. So to your point, the right side of the offensive line is going to get tested. I think Adeniji doesn't concern me that much. And I think Sharping looked, and we all watched him pretty closely after Kappa went down. I think he's going to be a serviceable right guard. He's not going to be at the level Alex Kappa was, but I think this is where you have to credit Duke Tobin, director of player personnel for the Bengals, for again this year doing an outstanding job finding a guy like that, maybe willing to pay more than the veteran minimum to make sure that when other teams didn't pick him up on the waiver wire, the Bengals were at the end of the waiver wire order and decided we want to invest in this guy just in case somebody on our offensive line goes down. And that's how they wound up with Max Sharping, your starting right guard, probably going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the experience is important that you kind of bring a guy out of the bench and he's not just, fresh like that. He's got quite a bit of starting experience with Houston where he was drafted. I think the issue is just, how does it stack up, right? They can't help the guard as much, that they can do things to
Brian
kind of
Callahan
support the tackle.
made
Talked
reference
about
to that.
that.
Yep.
And Kappa was playing really well. I think you saw the emotion in the locker room. Like Ted Karras was having a hard time celebrating. Cordell Vosen was having a hard time celebrating. Like it hit them pretty hard. And I think they know what Kappa was doing for them, and how, he was helping Ted with a lot of the center responsibilities. He said he could Kappa deserves 60% of the praise that he usually gets. But and I think it's just a tough injury to sort of turn around. And, that Ravens team, I thought they were waving the white flag. I don't think the defensive line got the memo last Sunday. They were the reason I thought that game was as close as it was in the first half, because they were, Burrow made some plays with his feet to really prevent that game from, not, from getting that 17-0 lead. But I thought the Ravens front was playing really well.
Yep.
And now you throw in another injury. It could be dicey, but they made it through their whole playoff run last year with two replacements on the offensive front as well. So
Yep.
it's not uncharted territory, but it's not where it's not ideal, obviously, and not where they wanted to be.
No, but teams go through this on their way to trying to win a Super Bowl. There are going to be bumps in the road like this. And if you know one thing about this 2022-23 Bengals team, they can handle adversity. They already lost Cheeto Awuzie, on Halloween, and haven't lost since. Obviously, they went 3-1 without Jamar Chase. They fared reasonably well without DJ Reader. I thought actually DJ Reader, the loss of DJ Reader, was the most impactful up to this point injury loss that they have had all year. The most noticeable loss. When you take
the play downgrade on the defensive line was
right.
more noticeable than anywhere else it's been when somebody's been out. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yes, and I think they went through losing Reader, they went through losing Jamar for 4 games. To an uncertain hip injury, let's face it. And they went through the loss of Cheeto Awuzie. Now they've had to deal with losing L. Collins again to a freak injury, but to a torn ACL. He's gone. And we're going to see how they respond with Alex Kappa. Is it ideal? Obviously not. But for everybody to say, well, the Bengals, Burrow is going to get killed now, I think that's jumping the gun a little bit.
Well, I think it was just that the idea, the weakness of this team in the playoffs last year, and at times in the regular season, was their offensive line. They spent all that money. Now two-fourths of what they invested in are out, and I think and they were playing, I think one of the reasons they went on the 8-game win streak was that offensive line really got things together. I mean, they really struggled through that first 4 weeks. Zach Taylor was like, well, they didn't struggle that much, but I mean, we all saw what we saw.
Right.
And they did not have any chemistry. It took them a while to build that. And I think they got to that
point.
They
didn't have training camp for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
They didn't play in preseason,
Essentially the first 6 weeks of the season were their training camp. And then they were really, really good. So I think that's just the unfortunate part for them, is that they invested so much in the offensive line. And now 2 of those key pieces won't be there for that, trying to get to the Super Bowl.
All right. I thought what Von Bell, we're talking, by the way, with Mike Nizilik of Cleveland.com, doing a wonderful job of covering the Bengals for Cleveland.com, along with Andrew Gillis and Mohammed Ahmad. He is also a blazing personality on the Strictly Stripes podcast, where you can also download that at Cleveland.com and wherever you download your favorite podcast. Von Bell talked about maximizing the moment. And I thought that was interesting on Monday when both he and Zach Taylor talked about it. And don't take any week for granted. And not that this team would, not that NFL teams take the playoffs for granted, but I just thought that the messaging of maximizing every opportunity you get has really hit home with this team. And that message started in training camp.
Well, and for the defense, they've forced 8 turnovers in the last, or 9 turnovers in the last 3 games or something like that. Right. And so, I mean, that's almost half of what they've had all season. I mean, they've really took that message to heart. And so, I think the defense, and I don't know, I don't know if part of it, I think, is some of these pieces on the defense are going to be gone next year. It feels like that. Then they sort of recognize that This is sort of maybe a last run as the defense is currently constructed. And maybe that's a little more motivation. I know they don't get into some of that, but it feels like that on the defensive side of the ball a little bit, that they realize, because I think they've called it kind of a brotherhood, especially in that secondary where Jesse Bates, Eli Apple are guys that might not be here next year.
Bates,
And so
Apple,
yeah.
Bell, and Pratt are the four guys to me that stick out on a defense, who all of whom may
Yeah.
not be here next year.
And so I think that is I feel like I do get a sense that that's sort of pushing them a little bit, that, beyond just the normal, like, yes, they want to win the Super Bowl, but this group has really come together, and what they've been through kind of the last 3 years as that core group together. I think that is on their mind.
The window is my whole career, said Joe Burrow
Yeah.
after the 27-16 win over Baltimore. And you also wrote about that on Cleveland.com. What did you make of those comments from the franchise quarterback?
I think there's going to be shirts, like I said, I think in that story, that, him in a window or something like that with the AFC rivals. Like, I think it's a good quote. It's one of the better quotes from Burrow. He's had two of his best press conference of like the year, back to back. He was really eloquent about DeMar's situation and handled that moment, I thought, as like I think,
Superbly.
really, really impressive. And then, after the playoff game, I felt like he like let that one slip, but I think it's true. I mean, look, he's got confidence in himself. And I think that, he's proven in college and now in the pros that he's a pretty good quarterback. So I don't think it's like outlandish. I think he's like, he goes as this team goes. And I don't think it was said sort of like, I'm carrying this team. I think he said, basically like, if they surround me with this level of talent, this organization keeps doing what they're doing and I do what I'm doing, that's true. We're going to be a championship level team.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the more encouraging things that any Bengal fan could want to hear, is that their best player is confident in the way the team, in the direction that the team is heading.
Right.
Well, you may not have been around here, Mike, but you're certainly aware of the Bengal aura around the National Football League, and it was not a good one for decades.
Yeah.
In the 90s and up until 2003, when Marvin Lewis arrived, it started to change quite a bit. But even after that winning in the mid 2000s and even the 5 straight playoff appearances, the Bengals hadn't won a playoff game. They were 0-7. Everybody knows the story that last year they won a playoff game for the first time in 32 years, blah, blah, blah. But to change the culture, it just shows you that one player and the work of the front office, namely, we've already talked about him, Duke Tobin, adding the right pieces can change the perception of the franchise, both inside the franchise and externally.
Well, I think the juxtaposition is Aaron Rodgers, right? He spent the last decade expressing his frustration with the management of not drafting offensive talent, not maximizing his window, and he sort of then said, maybe I should go elsewhere because you guys can't do this, and it's caused sort of drama. And I think they've underperformed because of that. He hasn't at time. I mean, he was MVP just last year, but I think that's sort of the comparison. You don't want your franchise player to feel that way and then have to feel like, have to go somewhere else to sort of be put in a better spot. And so I think that's sort of the comparison I would make, that he feels the complete opposite. He feels good about the direction of this franchise, and it's a good timing because he's going to get some money here in a short order. But I think that they're all sort of in lockstep. And I think too, the coaching staff, I mean, you see how they've sort of supported him. And I think they've really, I get the sense that their approach to coaching him is to sort of build him up and, keep moving forward and making him feel like empowered in the offense and a part of the decision making and part of the, game planning. And so I think it's all, they're building this to keep him happy, to keep him successful. Yeah, and I mean, it's
that much. I know he's young. I get it. He's 26. Yeah. He's been in the organization now three years, but nobody has put himself out there more than Joe Burrow and worked hard enough and produced the results that Joe Burrow has.
Yeah, I mean the results speak for themselves, right? On the precipice here of another playoff run, and make a Super Bowl. So I don't think they're wrong. I mean, I think they've done everything. They've built a machine here now that could be. They said on Sunday this is the standard. AFC North Division champions. That's the standard. That's the minimum. And so I think they've built it to make that come true.
It certainly feels like to me, Mike, that the Bengals take care of business against a Baltimore team, great defense, but a team by all rights, I think the Bengals should win at home in the playoffs. Great quarterback, as we've mentioned, Joe Burrow. Lamar Jackson may or may not play. Stay tuned on that all week long, obviously. And Buffalo's going to beat Miami. I see almost no way, almost like I saw no way for New England to go in to Orchard Park and beat the Bills this past Sunday, and they didn't, thanks to two amazing kickoff returns. I saw no way for the Patriots to win. I really see no way for the Dolphins to win this week in Orchard Park. It certainly does feel like it's going to be Bengals at Bills in the divisional round, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that will be a crazy. I mean, a lot. All eyes will be on that game. But it does. I think the Lamar Jackson thing. I think we've talked about this. I can't see him playing. And that's I just without him, it just doesn't feel like they have the sort of offensive firepower to sort of match up. It's not a good matchup for them without Lamar Jackson.
No, and I just don't see him playing. You don't either, right?
No, I mean, what, 6 weeks now, no practice, and all sorts of weird, back and forth with him and Harbaugh and the media, and it just seems like they
I
haven't got
almost
the thing
think like
figured out.
Sunday was that badge of honor game for Harbaugh. We almost pulled it out without you against all of Cincinnati's starters. And we're just going to ride this horse and take it as far as we can take it. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. That is kind of the John Harbaugh mentality.
Yeah, I mean, they're at a disadvantage, and I don't think it'll be Anthony Brown. I mean, I think it'll be Huntley, but still, they might, try to say Lamar, is possibility. I just don't. I can't.
What
get
did Zach Taylor say on Wednesday? Or on Monday, we have to prepare for the best player that would run their offense. And to me, I think that means Lamar, that they.
Yeah, but remember what Lou said last week when he's like, "We're not playing Lamar." He didn't say we're not playing Lamar. He's like, but I mean, he's sort of. I don't know. I think it'll do. I mean, if he's on the practice field, today or tomorrow, maybe you kind of start doing that. But if he's not practicing, I don't think you have to spend much time.
Oh, no, I would agree with that. Well, he is Mike Niziolek, does a great job covering the Cincinnati Bengals for Cleveland.com. Catch him on the Strictly Stripes podcast, also on Cleveland.com and wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Michael, how can people follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, at Michael Niziolek would be great. I'd love to get some more Bengals fans on there for sure.
Yeah, let's get it done, Bengal Nation, and let's get it done. Who Day Nation, everybody following the JungleRoar podcast, give my man Michael here a follow on Twitter. Also follow him on Twitter for the upcoming NFL playoffs and the Bengal playoffs that are going to be starting Sunday night. By the way, let me get your quick read, Mike, on the idea of a Sunday night game, 8:15 at Paycor Stadium.
I think the atmosphere will be good, especially with the Ravens. I think the fans were really not thrilled with how some of the extracurricular stuff, and I think they'll be sort of fired up. In terms of media, the primetime games are less than ideal, but for fans get all day. They
get lubed up, as Tom Brady once said.
Yeah, they'll be ready. One question I wanted to ask you.
Yes, go ahead.
Since I'm on, I'll take advantage. So Ted Karras said, they were smoking cigars in the locker room, a celebration, and he said Bill Belichick didn't allow cigars at all.
No, he did not.
That's amazing. Like that to me, that's like.
So here's why. It's real simple. He did not want players soaking up, being reminded by that scent in that locker room long term that they just won a division, because the division is not the end goal.
But he said they didn't allow cigars at all. Was it cigars at all? Because he didn't like cigars.
Well, that's probably just a personal choice. I know that having been around Bill, he wanted no celebrations that would literally hang over the team and remind the team that, that they had just won a division. That's not the end goal.
I
But
just I guess I like the idea of like he didn't like cigar smoke, so he's just like no cigar celebration.
yeah, and I believe that too, because Bill spent a lot of time walking in and around that locker room. Even when we were there, the media were in the locker room. Bill would walk through quite a bit,
Really? Okay.
and this won't surprise you. He very rarely wore a smile when he walked through the locker.
No, but I just thought it was awesome. Like, I am going to control every aspect. Like, I am going to dictate how the celebrations unfold. Like, that's just to me is like the ultimate. Like, he's in the weeds, man. Like, and like, it just that was
Controlling every aspect of that organization, and it looks like he'll be doing so for a 24th season in 2023.
But Ted could save the cigar. I think he's waiting. I think it rubbed off on him. He didn't smoke it. So like Ted saved it. So maybe he's saving it for after like the Super Bowl or AFC. But like he could, maybe growing up in the Bill organization, he's just like he couldn't bring himself to.
I would be surprised, Mike, that Bill would not allow a victory cigar in an opposing locker room, like after an AFC championship. That I would be surprised.
Maybe I'll have to get clarification. We'll see how far the rule extended.
Yeah, we'll have to find that out. Certainly, I think it's going to be another interesting playoff run. By the way, a cigar. Obviously, we all know the story of Joe Burrow and the national championship, the college football playoff championship, won again by Georgia in an embarrassingly huge rout over TCU, 65-7 Monday night. Joe Burrow's cigar celebration was again mentioned during the ESPN broadcast. Did you hear that?
I had the sound about, but when it got up to like 40, I just was like, I'm not going to listen anymore.
Nothing else to talk about, Mike.
I'm sure they were trying to find stories. Joe's explanation of that was that was more Joe Burrow like than his the windows open through my like. How was your cigar? It was good. It was good. I had a good time.
Joe Burrow, this is a vibe, and I forgot I think it was Hayden Hurst who said it, because that sounds like a Hayden Hurst description of another NFL player. Joe Burrow is a vibe, and I think truer words this year were never spoken. Anyway, he's Mike Niziolek. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael Niziolek, all one word. Follow his work on Cleveland.com and the Strictly Stripes podcast. For Mike Niziolek, I'm Mike Petralia, Trags. Thanks for tuning in this episode of the JungleRoar podcast. Be sure and click on the link below and subscribe and download wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Thank you again for watching. We'll talk to you next week.